So to be honest, in Fujifilm's X-mount lineup, there's not too many macro lenses, at least on the affordable side, to look into. You have Fuji's own 60mm f2.4, and I believe they have an 80mm f2.8 as well. But those lenses are kind of expensive. I think they retail as much as $600, $800, and if you buy used, maybe $400, $600. Don't quote me on that, but you know what I mean. And then so if you're looking for a macro lens for Fujifilm's lineup, you have to either go with those ones, or you could look at some other third-party lenses. But third-party lenses, to be honest, aren't that cheap either. I did some quick searches, and you have things like the 7 Artisan's 60mm f2.8, which retails for about $160, so that is probably one of the cheapest options you're going to get. But then you have other ones like these Zeiss lens. They have a 50mm f2.8, which retails for about $800. You also have the Venus Laowa, which retails for about $400 or so, and other lenses as well. But you get the point. Most X-mount macro lenses are fairly expensive. So when it comes to cheap macro lenses for Fujifilm, you are either going to have to go with one of these manual lenses or an older vintage lens. But today I want to present to you guys a really interesting newer lens that is actually quite budget and quite affordable if you're looking to get into macro photography. And that is the TT Artisan 40mm f2.8 macro lens. And this one retails for about $100. So it's actually quite affordable. Let's talk about this lens for a bit. It comes well packaged, quite well built. Most of this lens is actually made out of metal, so you're going to get a solid build quality. It actually feels a lot heavier than it looks, and it comes with this little pouch, which to be honest I probably would never really use anyways, but it's a nice addition. But yeah, it's mainly metal. It has a good heft to it. It also has this kind of screw-on lens cap, which to be honest I wouldn't use either. It just takes too long to screw on and off, but it is a nice addition as well. TT Artisan, if you're not familiar with them, they are a pretty solid company. They are similar to 7 Artisans, where they make a lot of manual lenses for different camera bodies, but I generally heard of TT's Artisans to be slightly more expensive and a slightly better build. What I like about this lens itself is it has a really small size, so it's comparable to the XF18-55 kit lens, but it's just slightly smaller. But it also has really good build quality, so that is nice to it as well. It has a click aperture, and the focus ring, it could be a little smoother, but it's not bad. It's just a little bit stiff. But as you see, if I turn the focus ring here, you're going to notice the magnification ratio shows up on the lens as well. So ideally for macro lenses and things like that, you want as close of a 1:1 magnification ratio as you can get. Obviously it's not necessary. You can get by with other magnification ratios, but if you are intending on using your macro lens for things like scanning film and whatnot, which is kind of mainly what I intend on using this lens for, then as close of a 1:1 magnification ratio as you can get is preferred. So let's go ahead and talk about usability, because the price and affordability and all that stuff is great and all, but if it doesn't perform well enough, then it's probably not a lens for consideration, right? Well, I've been testing this lens out for a few weeks now, and I've been using it from things like street photography to portraits to actual macro stuff. But just know that I am not a macro photographer. I don't do a lot of macro photography. Mainly I was going to use this to scan film, 35mm and 120 scans. But if you are into macro photography, don't judge my pictures too harshly. As a lens by itself, it is quite good. The sharpness is quite sufficient, at least for me. I haven't had any real problems with that, except for just I would misfocus sometimes because it's a fully manual lens, but that's to be expected. But otherwise, the lens quality is actually quite good. I've been using it on bodies such as the X Pro 1 and the X-T4, and I haven't had anything to really complain about. Macro photography itself is quite interesting because you can get really close to subjects and focus in on the details. There were actually a lot of images that I got quite pleasing results out of, and I thought were quite interesting just because I couldn't do this with the normal lens. You can get quite a lot of separation, especially if you want to focus in on the details, which I thought was actually a lot more fun than I would usually do, because like I said, usually I'm more lifestyle, daily, street photography, travel, whatever. But getting close up on these details gives a really unique and interesting perspective, especially when you're thinking about telling a story. So as a lens, for that purpose, it does excellent. It does very well, and I think you're not going to have too many problems with that. The one caveat, and I want to talk about something about the lens quality itself that I've noticed, is that it has a little kind of like white vignetting on it that I noticed when it's at f2.8 and your focus is kind of to infinity. This kind of improves though as you stop your lens to a higher aperture. or you start to change the focus a little bit, the haze kind of goes away and is removed, but it's just something to be noted. This might just be my lens copy itself, but I've just noticed that kind of like vignetting there as well. This can be easily fixed in post, however, so it's not too big of a problem, but I just thought I should kind of mention it that I noticed it on this lens. So overall, what do I think of this lens? Could I recommend it? And are there any other better options for you guys if you're looking to get into macro photography for the Fujifilm X mount? General purpose, I think this is a good lens. I think it's a really affordable option. $100 for a macro lens that is well built like this one is not that big of a deal. It's actually a really good deal. What other options you would have would be, like I said, the higher price points, which you would have to invest a little bit more money into, or you can get an older vintage lens. So right here I have a Canon FD lens. This is a 50mm f2.8, I believe, and this is what I was initially going to use to scan film with digital film scanning. And I think vintage lenses are good, but they have certain qualities or characteristics to them. So if you're looking for a photography lens, a vintage lens would be your deal because you can get one for about $40, $50, maybe even cheaper. This one I got for about 40 bucks, which is a pretty solid deal. But if you're planning on scanning film, you don't really want your lens to have a characteristic on it. You know what I mean? You want the cleanest, sharpest, whatever film scans. So I think going with a lens like the TT Artisan for the film scanning process would probably be a better bet. Just for purely photography, I think a better option would be to go for a cheaper vintage lens, because then you can get that kind of quality characteristics. Most of these vintage lenses are pretty well built and they have an interesting look to them, and I like using kind of older lenses as well. Those are just my thoughts on this lens and macro photography in general. I think overall I can't recommend this lens to anyone who is shooting Fujifilm X mount and thinking about getting into more macro photography on a slightly cheaper budget. So if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I'll try and get back to you and whatnot. Let me know what you guys think about this lens, or what other macro options you guys would use in the Fujifilm X mount system. And if you like this video, please like the video, subscribe to this channel for more stuff. And as always, I'll see you guys in another video. Thanks for watching. Peace.